Now, moving on. The second thing I want to address, and this is two parts, is I want to address why I don't think fallen angels are demons. And then I want to address this notion, this common belief that Revelation 12 speaks about when the devil fell with a third of the angels. And this is describing that great rebellion. Okay, so I want to tackle these two things. So first, why I think fallen angels are not demons. Now, one theologian wrote this. He says, this notion is ubiquitous in popular Christian books and preaching. Like, it is the predominant view that demons are fallen angels are demons. And so when I posted a clip from episode 11 on social media, like, I got literally hundreds of comments, DMs, people saying I'm out to lunch, that I'm preaching heresy, I'm a false teacher, I'm misguided, I'm misinformed, I'm leading people astray. Like, people went nuts. And this is the stuff that they're coming at me with as part of why I'm wrong, is that this belief that when the angels fell with the devil, that they turned into demons. Or that, you know what, maybe there's just different classes of demons. Or that every evil creature is just a different kind of demon. Or they're only angels and demons, and that's just it, right? And so I got variations of those comments, but that is what I received 100-fold. But as we just looked at above in the last section, this clearly can't be the case that there's just angels and demons. Like, there are so many more beings, and things are just way more complex. They're just not that simple. And so we can't just say that demons are just fallen angels and angels are just demons. Even though that's what church tradition has led us to believe, it's just, I think that this whole thing came from an incorrect interpretation of Revelation chapter 12. So I think this, and again, I could be wrong, but from my growing up in the church, from what I was taught growing up, and from what I've heard from hundreds and hundreds of other believers, this is where I think it all began. This false idea, this false idea that, in my opinion, where fallen angels and demons just kind of merge together and to become one. And it's Revelation chapter 12. And so I'm just going to quickly read the first 10 verses here. All right? Just so that we're all on the same page and we all understand the context. So, Revelation 12, verses 1 to 10 says, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was pregnant, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his heads were 7 crowns, and his tail swept a third of the stars of heaven and hurled them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. And she gave birth to a son, a male who was going to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God, and there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. And there was a war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. The dragon and his angels waged war, and they did not prevail. So this is the text. And you'll notice that you see this statement talking about a great red dragon, where his tail swept away a third of the stars and hurled them to the earth. Now, when you drop down to verse 13, you'll also see this. It says, when the dragon saw that he'd been thrown down to earth, he pursued the woman. So you have this red dragon being thrown down to earth, and along with him were a third of the stars, which we also learned are divine beings. And in this context, they're typically defined as angels. And so people take this text, and then they've just simply decided, oh, this is when the devil fell. and he took a third of the angels with him, and this is how the devil got his army. And so then you have the devil, and then you have demons. They just got merged together. But see, here's the thing. We got to do some basic Bible study here. Okay, you can't just take a verse and pull it out of its context and then decide what it means. Because when you actually understand the context here, and I'm going to get into this deeper in just a minute, but the context here is not describing a great rebellion and a great fall when the devil rebelled and was thrown out of heaven with a third of the angels. The context of Revelation chapter 12 is the birth of the Messiah. It's the birth of Jesus. And so, was there a war described here? Yes. But this war is not depicting this great rebellion where the devil then is thrown out of heaven with a third of the angels, who then all of a sudden are now going to be called fallen angels, who are then now going to be called demons. Like, that is not how you do Bible study. That is not the context of here. And so in the last episode, I already talked about the origin of demons, right? The disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, of the giants. So there were no Nephilim giants in heaven. The fallen angels, the angels that fell with the devil, whenever this rebellion was, they were not the Nephilim. Fallen angels are not the Nephilim. The Nephilim is the offspring of them. So they cannot be the demons, because the demons are the disembodied spirits of the dead Nephilim. Now, I know it's confusing. Maybe some of your heads are like, what is this guy talking about? I know it's confusing, but one writer, he said this, one of my favorite biblical scholars, he said, nevertheless, demons are consistently cast as disembodied spirits of dead Nephilim and their giant clan descendants. Those spirits are the offspring of the angels that sinned before the flood, so the demons cannot be those fallen angels. So demons and fallen angels are different entities. The fallen angels that fell with the devil, whenever that was, joined him in his great rebellion, yes, but they did not just all of a sudden morph into what we call demons. Are fallen angels demonic? Sure, I can give you that. Are they malevolent? Are fallen angels malevolent? Yes. Are they evil? Yes. Are they anti-God? Yes. But that does not mean that they are the specific entity that we would call a demon. Angels are not spirits. They're not unclean spirits. They don't possess. Why? Because they already have a body. This is why demons need to have host bodies, right? Because they're disembodied. They were at one point bodied in the Nephilim. They were the giants. They were at one point. They may have even be the disembodied spirits of those crazy mythological creatures, the satyrs, the centaurs, the minotaurs. When those spirits, if they're half divine, half animal, when those beings died, they could be the disembodied spirits of those too. But they're disembodied. They're not bodied. And that's my point. So this is why I don't think that this is a correct reading of Revelation 12. Just because angels fell with the devil does not, and because they're evil and they're rebellious, does not all of a sudden mean that they are demons. I'm not sure if I explained that correctly, but that's what I think. That's what I believe. Now, secondly, I got so much feedback, even more aggressive than the demons and fallen angels thing that I said, but I posted another video specifically saying how Revelation 12 doesn't describe the war in heaven when the devil was cast out with a third of the angels. Now, you talk about passionate people. I got so many comments, like brutal comments. I was being sworn at. People were calling me every name in the book. And these are Christian people, because they could not understand how I could say what I said, how I could make that video. And a lot of the people that were more nice, and they were just kind of like, hey, Joel, like, what are you talking about? Like, the verses actually talk about the devil being thrown out of heaven and a third of the angels going with him, a star, like the stars, like it actually says that. So like, what are you even saying? See, well, here's the thing. This is why I changed because I grew up in the Pentecostal church, and this was the common belief. This is where the devil fell with a third of the angels, and this is describing what happened right here. But as I already mentioned, see, here's the thing. You have to understand context when you read the Bible. Context is king. It's so important. It's so paramount. It is the only way to actually read the Bible correctly. And when you read Revelation chapter 12, when you actually read it, Revelation 12 is speaking of the birth of Jesus. We already read it. And in the first few verses, it says, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was pregnant, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. And then you go further down, and it says, and the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth. And when she gave birth, he might devour her child. And she gave birth to a son, a male who was going to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. This is speaking of the birth, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. This is the context. This verse is not speaking of the primordial war in heaven, the war that took place back in ancient times when the devil decided enough is enough, I want to be like God, and God kicked him out. This is not describing that event. What we see here are the events surrounding the birth and the life and the death of Jesus being described in astrological terms. And that's a whole other subject that's way above my head that I can't fully understand or explain. But I've heard a lot of teaching on Revelation is very astrological, talking about the position of the stars and the planets, and it's all connected here. That tells a story. And so in the heavenlies, yes, there is a war being described here. The great dragon was thrown from heaven to earth. And it does say his tail swept a third of the stars with him. Yes. But there is no verse here that talks about the context being this primordial rebellion. You can't just take that and say, oh, well, that's what it means. If the context is talking about the birth of Jesus, the life of Jesus, the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus, if that's the context, then you can't all of a sudden just then take these other verses and just say, no, this is actually what it means. The context is the birth of Jesus. And so it can't mean that. But yes, I want to say this. Yes, there was a war. At some point in the past, there was a primordial war that took place in heaven where the devil fell. He took angels with him. And they became fallen angels. They became his army, his host, to do all his bidding. That did happen. My point is that it wasn't Revelation chapter 12. I know it's convenient to think that. I know as humans, especially modern humans who live in the 21st century, that we love to know things. We have to have answers, that we have to look at the Bible and answer the question, well, when did the devil fall? And so we have to find that answer. And so then we'll go to Revelation 12 and we'll see a text that seems to suggest that. And then we run with it because it makes us feel good, makes us feel like we actually know the answer. The problem is context. And so I'm not going to belabor that point. Demons are not fallen angels. Fallen angels are not demons. And Revelation 12 does not speak of the great primordial rebellion where the devil was cast out of heaven. This is speaking of a different situation. It was speaking of a different set of circumstances. It was speaking of a war that was taking place surrounding the birth, the life, the death, and the ascension of Jesus. And it was being used in astrological term and imagery. And that's the context. And I'm sticking to it.